Welcome back, everyone. This is Austin with 2F/C Tactical, bringing you our From the Vault series, featuring historical and interesting firearms that we have coming through our shop, or even our personal collection, as the examples you see behind me. We have had some very interesting pieces that come through that are available in our shop, and we want to feature and highlight those first and bring those to you. We've had a few videos recently featuring such as the Human and the Husqvarna 1941 M38 rifle, and today we have a pistol for you. We have the Astra Model 400. This is a very interesting, kind of a forgotten weapon. A little shout out to Ian McCollum there on his series of the 20th century and World War II specifically. While this was originally designed in 1921 to replace their 1913 and 1916 pistols, these became famous, if you will, in the Spanish Civil War of the 1930s. Many of our historical figures that we know today actually participated in this event. Most famously, George Orwell actually fought on the side of the Nazis and Franco, because the Nazis were very friendly to Franco, Franco being a fascistic dictator, and came to his aid and fought alongside Franco and helped put him in power in Spain, where he would remain for decades, long beyond World War II. And this pistol that had been designed a little bit before that became one of the predominant sidearms of that era. The interesting piece of history, if you will, that no one really talks about because it has more famous firearms of that time. And of course, in the 1930s, there's a lot going on just worldwide. We could say it kicks off 1914 to 1918, World War I. Post-World War I, you had the Roaring Twenties. You got all of these technological innovation and economic success, and boom, throughout the world, with the exception of Germany, of course. That followed by the 1930s and that massive crash, right? The Great Depression that didn't affect just the United States, but all of Europe and pretty much all of the world, where the economies of the world just completely fell apart for various reasons, and that gave the rise to Adolf Hitler's Nazi Party in Germany, Mussolini in Italy, of course, Tojo and Hirohito in Japan, and Franco and Spain. It kind of spread through Europe. Stalin and Vladimir Lenin were kind of the first during World War I. So this pistol was designed during that setting, which means that there's a lot more famous firearms that were available at the time that had a more outsized effect, or even a more prominent role, if you will. So it kind of is forgotten. But the Astra Model 400 is very, very interesting design in itself, because it features an all-sealed design. As you can see, there's a nice tight ring right there along the barrel that seals everything into the slide. Now, you do have your ejection port and, of course, the undercut of the slide where there is some exposure, but for the most part, it's completely sealed on the slide. This would come into play later for the Wehrmacht. So this is not chambered in the 9mm that you and I know. This is chambered in 9mm Largo. That's 9x23 versus 9x19, which is the Luger version that we know today. In terms of the cartridge's power, somewhat similar to 38 Super. In terms of its overall length and size, if you've ever seen 7.62x25, somewhat similar to that in terms of the size of the cartridge itself. It's kind of a fast, hot round, a little bit more powder than you would see in a 9x19. So a very effective cartridge. Very hard to find today, to be fair. That's something I actually did look up for this video. While it's out there, it's pretty expensive. No one really makes it in any kind of bulk anymore, and there's really no modern arms chambered in it. Spain, during the Cold War, would transition towards NATO rounds such as 9x19, 7.62 by 5.1, and 5.56. So they would get away from their more proprietary, if you will, rounds to the more standardized rounds that we see today in the West. This pistol features some very typical European features. You have the magazine release right here on the bottom of the pistol grip. That's how you would drop your magazine. It is not a free drop magazine like you would see in a modern pistol. It is a captured magazine system where when you pull it, you have to manually remove it to reload your pistol. But this pistol acquitted itself quite well during the Spanish Civil War and did capture the attention of Germany. So there's a couple variants of this. There's a smaller version that is the Astra 300, served with the Chilean Navy, the Spanish Navy, and the Wehrmacht and the Luftwaffe. And this larger version, they use these 9mm Largo versions as well as a modified version renamed the Model 600 in North Africa. Germany obviously had its sights set on the oil in North Africa to fuel their war machine. But when they go into North Africa, very arid desert environment, they had problems with their pistol designs. For instance, for my personal collection here, the Walther P38, the standard issue German sidearm from World War II. You will see some similarities to this, to the Beretta M9, which would feature some of the same issues with the United States military, hence why it was replaced in 2015. But the design of this particular pistol has everything exposed, on the slide, including the firing mechanisms, massive opening, right, for the ejection and loading of the cartridges with your cutouts and everything, plus with this being a hammer fire pistol, you have exposure back here. These did not operate particularly well in the desert. No shocker. Again, the Beretta M9 copied this design in some instances and very much featured some of the same drawbacks. So they were looking for a reliable sidearm that would work in North Africa. That's where they turned to this, with its kind of sealed off cylinder design. This allowed it to operate much more efficiently in that arid and desert sand environment that they encountered in North Africa. About 6,000 of these were modified to the 9mm, 9x19mm, I should say, cartridge, specifically for Germany. They did get some Largo ones early on, and they were intimately familiar with this pistol, having fought alongside Franco in the 30s in the Spanish Civil War. It's where Hitler and the Wehrmacht and his various generals really worked out their tactics and put their newest weaponry to the test that they would unleash on Europe in the 1939-1940 with Blitzkrieg. So the Spanish Civil War actually could be called the start of World War II in some sense, that's where all these players started to test out what they were about to do later. And this was a intricate piece of that particular era. You don't see them all that often anymore. They kind of become a bit rare. They did make a lot of them, and they still pop up from time to time. Not overtly expensive in terms of adding to your collection. But if you're a World War II collector, this is definitely an interesting piece that you could have. And again, kind of a forgotten piece in many ways. It's much more famous P38 cousin that would serve all the way up through the 1970s. This one was kind of phased out fairly quickly. As the war ended and NATO forms to counter the Soviet threat, the Spanish, even though they remained neutral, and Franco and the West were definitely not on great terms, the West kind of looked the other way when it came to his sympathies for Nazi Germany in the 1940s. While he didn't ever provide troop assistance, he definitely allowed them to build submarine bases on various Spanish isles, used trade routes, airspace. They helped provide munitions and trade. So they weren't neutral in the sense of like Switzerland. They didn't do anything. They definitely picked a side. But the Soviet threat ended up kind of pushing all that to the side, and they would adopt the more modern cartridges that you and I know today, which is where like the Star BM 9mm 1911 style pistol would come into play as it became more of the standard issue sidearm due to it using those cartridges. But again, this is available. It's worth looking at. It's a very interesting history piece. Definitely hope to see you in the shop sometime. And at minimum, we'll bring more of these types of things to you each and every week. We have some Carl Gustavs that walk through the door. We have some Turkish Mausers, M38 Mausers that walk through the door. So we'll definitely break those out for you and kind of give you a little bit dive into those here in the future. And very excited about those kind of things. Until next time, though. We look forward to seeing you.